So, welcome back to another video. In this video, I wanted to cover more since we had a economic update from the Federal Reserve here in the United States. This video is being shot on January 12th and probably will be released tomorrow on Friday the 13th, January 13th. We had a update from the Federal Reserve on economic data. Most importantly, that inflation is still trending downward. It is still growing, but it is growing slower than it has been growing. And I also want to talk about in this video how Federal Reserve banks around the globe are starting to respond in major economies to the economy as a whole, and how the global economy is looking overall, and how you need to be preparing and adjusting around where things might be headed. We're going to talk about it all in this video. This is JP from Blueprint for Prosperity, helping you to increase your net worth through relationship banking, maximizing your borrowing capacity, the proper use of life insurance, and the ownership of real estate. I want you guys to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm uploading content on a daily basis to help you customize your blueprint for prosperity. So the Federal Reserve today broke the numbers out that inflation in the United States is now down to 6.5%, which at its peak in June or July of 2022 was at about 9.1%. So definitely been on about a 6-month trajectory trending downward since rates have been going up since the earlier part of 2022. So the Federal Reserve in the United States is making progress against inflation. But the reality of it is inflation is still about 3 times higher than they would like it to be. The Federal Reserve's in the United States target for inflation is 2%. We're at about 6.5 currently. Something important to keep in mind about this inflation situation, even though it's cooling down, inflation is still in its early stages and has quite a ways to go before we fully feel the effects of it. Major banking institutions like JP Morgan Chase have already disclosed that cash holdings in households in the United States is still pretty strong. And the relevance to that is we're not fully feeling the effects of inflation because many of us, not all, but many of us still have excess cash from the pandemic scenario where a lot of cash was pumped out into the system. But at the same time, you have debt going through the roof, credit card debt in particular, as a demonstration that things are getting tight for a lot of people in the United States. The Federal Reserve has made it clear that they're going to continue to increase rates for sure coming up in February, and at some point lock them in where they are and let them sit for an extended period of time. So based on what the Fed is projecting, they're staying pretty hawkish on their policy at the time, and for pretty good reason. That likely means that interest rates in the United States are going to stay pretty high, or at least what we consider high at this time, for a considerable amount of time throughout the rest of the year, highly likely, and possibly through 2024, or at least into 2024. That having been said, some other factors that came out in the Fed's discussion or meeting today was that the certain portions of inflation are still increasing. So they break it down into several different categories. We're not going to go into them in specific right now because I just want to have this conversation on a more general level for you to get the value out of it. But certain levels of inflation are increasing. So for instance, energy costs are dropping down some because gas prices are going down, not overall energy. But the percentage for like food in the United States is still kind of trending upward. In some other areas, it's still trending upward. The job market is still hot in the United States. And that's something that the Fed is actually trying to work against, believe it or not. They're looking to try to create a slowdown in the job market. And right now, because there's a shortage of talent in so many industries, that's not happening at the rate that they would like. This is likely to keep the Federal Reserve hawkish on rates, aka increasing rates or stabilizing them at a high level. The intent is, again, to try to cool down the flow of money in the economy, and that includes lowering the demand for jobs, because when there's a high demand for talent, then that means companies are paying more. When they pay more, then obviously this leads to more money in people's hands. They spend more, and then the prices keep going up. You see where this is going, right? So that's on the domestic front for the United States. We have the You have changes in the Canadian economy. You have changes in the UK economy, where the Federal Reserve in those countries are also dealing with either raising rates. Canada is starting to ban external investment in their real estate because of major price increases in Canada's real estate, which is through the roof in some places. It's absolutely insane. I don't know how people afford it. But they are putting policies together that are targeting foreign investment in Canada's real estate market, which is their fight against housing price inflation. The UK is dealing with their own rate increases and their own challenges economically. The Bank of Japan is also going through its own changes and rate changes as well, and fighting their economic problems. China's economy is slowing down tremendously. Now, not every economy around the globe is obviously some emerging economies that are doing pretty well, but the larger economies in, first world countries are struggling. And this is something that we need to take note as everyday citizens in these countries. We need to be taking notes, because there's also been a huge accumulation of gold and silver by Federal Reserve banks in other countries like China, Indonesia. India, China, India. These countries, their Federal Reserve is accumulating, and has been for a while, a lot of precious metals. And there's a lot of speculation about them preparing for a major currency crisis and economic crisis that they're worried about. These are some of the more boring, less talked about topics when you start talking about Federal Reserve and these major financial institutions like the IMF. And, these entities, as behind the scenes as they are, the moves they're making, policy shifts they have going on are very informative about where things are going to be going and what ripple effects that we can be feeling as everyday citizens in these different countries around the globe. So my practical advice or guidance for you guys, barring that I'm not a financial advisor, but I am a financial professional. And my recommendation and advice, I can't give completely around everybody around the globe, because your economy and your money is different than it is here for us in the United States. But what I can say that can apply to anyone around the globe, some of the most valuable places for your money to be in these tumultuous times that we're in and that we're headed in likely is going to be in real assets. And those of you who are not as familiar with precious metals and other resource investments that you can be making, you need to start doing a little homework, because this is not that hard for you to get into. If you just buy physical precious metals, invest in them in your IRAs if you're in the United States, and various other forms of investment, you can be putting your money in assets that will hedge and possibly even grow in these crazy economic times that we're in. And this is where I want many of you to focus. Now, obviously, if you are skilled in the stock market, if you're skilled in the real estate market, if you're skilled with cryptos and so on and so forth, then I definitely advise you to keep playing your odds. If you have skill sets, then there's opportunities everywhere. It's not doom and gloom across the board. I'm really kind of speaking out to more of you who are financially conscious, but wouldn't consider yourself financial experts or experts in investment strategies, that may have capital, you have good savings, or you have good financials, and you're trying to figure out a way to protect your money or maybe even grow your money. If you're local in the US, the Fed stays hawkish, then if you're not willing to invest, if you can't find a safe strategy or an effective strategy for yourself to invest, then staying in deposit products won't be the worst thing in the world. You're not going to be beating out inflation, but the deposit product rates are reasonable and going to mitigate losses of your purchasing power until you figure out where to put your money. So again, CDs and savings accounts right now are looking more attractive if you're domestic in the United States and possibly in other Western countries. If you are in India, if you're in China and you're catching this content, greetings to you. But also, you need to be looking at hard assets with your money. And many of you in that culture, in your countries in India and China, are already very much connected to, precious metals. It's very much still a part of your culture to have ownership in these things, and as household items. And in Western countries, the United States, we've gotten very far away from that. And many of you that are domestic in the West, need to start reconsidering precious metals and other resource investments. These are the driving factors of our economy. Don't get it twisted. When you start thinking about anything that's digital or electric, you can't have it without silver. This is just one example. And the energy sector, when you start thinking about nuclear energy and the push towards greener energy, stuff like uranium and other investments become very prominent. These are not only opportunities for you to protect your purchasing power, but potentially grow exponentially financially in the coming years as economic cycles continue to play out and things start to shift. And these previously attractive investments start to lose value and become more risky, like the stock market, like traditional real estate investments. You guys are going to have to get a little bit more creative. Now, again, if you have specialties around these areas, go for it. But for those of you who are hardworking, you have savings, you have access to income, and you're just confused or you're not certain about where to put your money, this video is in order to get you to understand that the global economy is not in good shape on a large scale. Major economies are loaded to the hills in the eyeballs in debt, and they're having to raise interest rates in order to slow down inflation. But while in the process of raising interest rates, they're raising their cost of servicing debt, putting governments, federal governments, in real tough positions, Federal Reserve banks in real tough positions, picking between their economy, inflation, servicing debt on a national level. Now, all of these things are putting strains on currencies. It's just a mess. And one of the safest places to be when this kind of economic insanity is going on is usually in the resource sector, precious metals. This is where millionaires can be born, sometimes multimillionaires, or at minimum, ensuring the protection of your purchasing power and other natural resources and day-to-day household items you might want to be stocking up on because you never know what's going to happen. I appreciated having this conversation with y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in and grabbing this content. I want you to stay focused, stay in motion. I'll see y'all soon.